Rubinia Soulsinger is a legendary creature from Legends, and we're going to talk about it today. Rubinia Soulsinger is a 2/3 creature that costs 2 generic and a blue and a white and a green mana, for a total casting cost of 5. You can tap Rubinia to gain control of target creature. Rubinia does not tap or untap this creature. If Rubinia becomes untapped, you lose control of this creature. You may choose not to untap Rubinia as normal during your untap phase. You also lose control of target creature if either Rubinia leaves play or you lose control of Rubinia. Hey dudes, so for the next 5 days we're going to talk about legendary creatures from Legends that I think are pretty playable and interesting. Now, when I say playable, I mostly mean in like Old Border Commander or something similar, but a couple of these are pretty okay. Legends is known for having legendary creatures that are really bad, and this is true, but there are a few that are pretty decent and even good, and these are the cards that I wanted to highlight. We're going to be going over one creature of each shard basing the order of the primary color, which is why we're starting with green, white, blue. Rubinia is pretty interesting. You could argue that she isn't as strong as Angus Mackenzie, and I'd say you're probably right. But I did want to talk about Rubinia more, as this ability is a little bit more interesting than tap to fog. So Rubinia is fairly powerful in low power games, and if there are a lot of creatures getting cast, Rubinia can keep doing her thing. The obvious synergy here is to pair her with as many sacrifice outlets as you can, so that you can take control of a creature, then sacrifice it for value, and you've turned your control magic commander into repeatable removal. You could also just, of course, keep the creature if it's providing more value than stealing one thing per turn cycle. But the nice thing about versatility is you can choose to do whichever of those things benefits you the most at the time. Now, green, white, and blue aren't known for having an overabundance of sack outlets, especially in the earlier sets, but there are ways to do that. I'll be focusing on the card pool of the first 4 sets, commonly called the Four Horsemen set, but obviously the larger the card pool, the more options you would have. But these videos would get a bit out of hand if I didn't draw the line somewhere, and I thought this was a decent enough place to draw the line. In the dark, your only real option is City of Shadows, but this is kind of a novel way to make use of a card that is not terrible, but arguably pretty bad. So that is pretty interesting, in my opinion. Legends gives you Life Chisel, which is slow, but it does work. And you could also use Sword of the Ages, especially if you're running more creature-stealing tech like Satyr Willow, Preacher, and Old Man of the Sea. But this isn't the most optimal home for Sword of the Ages, and it's a little awkward in this deck since it's a one-use thing, but it can be pretty cool if everything lines up well. And if your meta is running a lot of artifact creatures, or just a lot of artifacts and you happen to be running Titania's Song, you can make some use of Sage of Latnam from Antiquities by stealing their thing that is an artifact creature and then sacrificing it to draw a card. That is a bit of a stretch though. It's probably not likely you'll get that set up. But if you were digging through Antiquities, you could also just run Ashnod's Altar, which is probably the best sacrifice outlet in the Four Horsemen sets. I did mention Old Man of the Sea from Arabian Nights, but you could also try to make Unstable Mutation work. This would be a really slow way of going about it, but if you hit in with the creature a few times, eventually someone will block it, or the -1/-1 counters will do the job for you. But depending on how big the creature is, that'll take at least 4 turns, so maybe not the fastest strategy, but you could do it. Metamorphosis is sort of the green sacrifice, and you could definitely use that in this list for some pretty cool things, which is pretty fun. Diamond Valley is pretty similar to Life Chisel, and you could use that if you have a copy lying around or a printer. And all the way back in Alpha, Berserk would be pretty useful here, as it gives you a power spike and you have even less reason to care about the creature gets removed because it just lets you take a different one. Obviously, these are not a lot of options, but that's just the options I could think of from the first 4 expansions. If you're playing in a larger card pool, you obviously have a lot more options. Rubinia is pretty interesting, and I would say even with the smallest card pools, there are enough pieces to make a fairly competent deck that has a decent plan of attack, and as much consistency as any of the other decks running around. You also have access to some surprisingly cool consistency pieces being in these colors. Obviously, blue has a lot of busted stuff going on and tons of card draw depending on what the ban list is and your card access, but white provides you with land tax, which is arguably pretty good, and visions, which can help you dig for a sack outlet or something like that. While green gives you access to Sylvan Library, which, can help you dig, and if you're really desperate, natural selection, which can also help you get what you need, and goes pretty well with Sylvan Library. In such a curated environment like Four Horsemen EDH or whatever, rules and restrictions your group is playing with, this card is pretty interesting. You can get hit by like Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning and, pretty much every other removal spell, which, is what it is. But you are also in the colors to be running some pretty strong counter magic, which I would probably recommend as you're likely to get targeted more often if you are taking other people's things, which is what this deck does. Overall, I'd say if you have an interest in playing a variation of Old Border Commander, Rubinia is far from the worst option you could pick. Granted, if your card pool is every Old Bordered set, there are a lot better options, and even in Legends you'd have to choose between this and Angus Mackenzie or Arcades Sabbath. Angus is arguably better, and Arcades Sabbath is most certainly worse, but any of these 3 are completely fine choices, especially if you want to play Bant and are limiting yourself to legendary creatures from Legends. What do you guys think of Rubinia Soulsinger? I didn't really talk about using this card in 1v1 games because it is pretty suboptimal in that environment, and while I'm sure this saw lots of play, I'm not entirely sure what I would say about trying this in 1v1. You'd have to have pretty weak collections for this to be impactful. Still, I'd love to hear any experiences you dudes might have with this card. Oh yeah, I also guess it's worth mentioning Mereki Re Barrett, or however you pronounce that, from Ice Age. This card does a similar thing, but it gives you access to black, meaning you could have more sacrifice opportunities, but it also doesn't natively untap, so you need to jump through other hoops, but it also comes down much faster. I think it's debatable on which of these is better, but it is likely Mereki Re Barrett, or however you fucking pronounce that made-up name. But we're talking about Legends from Legends, which Rubinia is and Mereki is not. So, let's move on to the art. Rubinia Soulsinger was originally illustrated by Rob Alexander, and this art is pretty sweet. She is actually a fairy. You can see her wings folded up behind her, which is a detail that I missed for a long time. Otherwise, the details are really solid. I like the lighting and the shading of her hair. It does a great job of simulating depth, and the vegetation in the background is honestly the best part of this illustration. It's so well done. Like many of the Legends cards, Rubinia was reprinted in Chronicles, and I normally just kind of skip past this kind of thing, but the Chronicles version of this art is way better. I don't know if they applied like a sharpness tool to this, just fudged with the contrast or saturation, or just rescanned the original art, but the Chronicles version has way more depth and looks more real, and just really does a better job of showcasing the art. Anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting. Rubinia Soulsinger was also reprinted into Commander 2013, and this version was illustrated by Cynthia Shepard. Cynthia Shepard did a fantastic job on this art, and there are a lot of really cool details in it, but I can't talk about any of that until we address the absurdity of this art. Now, I don't actually have any evidence for if this is true or not, and I wasn't bothered to go look for it, but I swear I read something somewhere that confirmed that Cynthia here misread or misheard the art direction and thought the card's name was Rubinia Soulsinger, which is why this art has her holding a contract to sign. And if that's true, that means that they probably used the flavor text to try to just run with it, which is even funnier to me. It definitely looks like the art of someone called Rubinia Soulsinger. Again, I might just be remembering an internet lie or a rumor, but it is funny, so that's the story I'm going with. Like I said, the art itself is phenomenal. The art piercing through the trees and forming a beacon behind her is just really cool, and the forest is really well detailed with just lots of cool vegetation. Her dress is well done too. Overall, it's a really interesting piece, but if I was going to play Rubinia, I'd probably just pick up a copy of the Chronicles version, which has, in my opinion, the best art. It is pretty wild to say that the Chronicles version looks better, but that's how I personally feel. Those are the only two arts for this legend, but that's more than some of these have, so keep that in mind when you're trying to guess which legend we're talking about tomorrow. I'll give you a hint, it's Esper. And also that one does have another printing. I don't know if that'll be enough information to give it away. You can go look if you're a fucking dork. Anyway, let me know what you think of Rubinia in the comments, or give us a guess as to who's getting talked about tomorrow, if you want. You can also, of course, like the video. If you liked it, you can subscribe if you give a shit, but either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thank you for watching.